multitasking. I'll go and find your slides in the meantime. So this is our first presenter of this slot today is Philip Schmidt, talking about NTP and evil. Oh, geez.
Thank you,
Evil
Marco.
NTP. Good luck.
So, I'm neither Jeff Houston nor am I Randy Bush. The history of this presentation was given at Apricot 6 weeks ago in Kuala Lumpur. And I suggested to Jeff that he might like to give the same presentation here in Dubai at MENOG, and he thought that was a great idea. I think he missed out the little bit about he giving the presentation, so I volunteered to do it instead, because Jeff's travel diary is pretty busy, actually. I mean, it was mentioned before in Garab's talk about some of this research activity, but he spends a lot of time tracing around the world, presenting a lot of this work, because it's very relevant for a lot of the current things going on in the internet. So I'm sure most of you will have heard of the NTP DOS attacks and so forth. So this was a slide set that Jeff and Randy put together, probably about the week before Apricot started, because that's when the major DOS attacks were happening. I mean, you probably remember some of the headline news. I don't know, I think the issue about the NTP attacks has been and almost gone again. I don't really see any people pay much attention, or at least there are not many presentations or newspaper headlines about such and such had a big DOS attack. So it does reflect that the community has moved very, very quickly to sort a fairly major, I suppose, not hole in the internet in itself, but it's moved to sort what is part of the infrastructure operations that we've all really taken for granted. So let's have a look at really the evolution of evil. I mean, if you've been in the industry for as long as, well, at least I have, you'll have known that in the early days of doing bad things, you just sent a big stream of packets towards people, and, well, those people suffered the end results of the attack that was started. So, but it was fairly straightforward, as it shows in the slide. It was really the attacker would just send a flood of packets. The flood of packets that the attacker could send very much depended on the bandwidth available to the attacker. And so if the attacker was on a home broadband connection or whatever it was back then, dial-up for whatever, that's really the only impact it could have. But then, of course, as years progressed, various operating systems with no real built-in security started appearing on people's laptops and servers and so forth. They became easy to exploit, and so you could really enroll what's called a bot army. In other words, machines that are owned to send, again, denial of service packets towards the various victims. So one person could then institute a fairly substantial attack. And now those have been the common attacks through, I would say, late 90s, like 98, 99, 2000s, through, even to the current day. But, the internet industry is more able to deal with those. We've got various technologies like remote trigger black hole filtering and so forth, which allows victims and the victim service providers to do something about some of the attacks that take place. The thing is, at least with the bot army, is that it kept you a bit more hidden. You were no longer the source of the attack, but with a bit of research work, you could probably find out who was the cause. But now, and this is the third stage in the evolution, you can co-opt innocent to assist in your evil activities. In other words, use uncorrupted servers to launch the attack on the unsuspecting victims. Now, this is not using a server that's been owned by and taken over by anybody else. This is using a server just sitting on the internet, minding its own business, just behaving itself, talking to the normal infrastructure. Using UDP. Now, UDP is a fine protocol. Now, TCP, of course, you're aware of a three-way handshake, I presume. It's a reliable connection mechanism to make sure we can get data from A to B and vice versa. UDP is not really intended for that. UDP is very much if you want a fast but very efficient short transaction thing. So it's been used for things like DNS and so forth. You send a query to a server, one packet, short packet, the server sends an answer, and that's it, done. I mean, you can actually send UDP on bigger transactions as well. There's some nice small print that Jeff's provided, which you can't see on the screen. You definitely will not see on the webcast, and I can't even see on my screen here either. So get the slides and you can read the small print. Now, unlike TCP, there's no handshake between the two parties for UDP. All that happens is the server flips the source and destination addresses and sends the answer in the packet. There's no check on authenticity. There's no source check or anything like that. It's just, oh, I get a packet. Oh, they want an answer. Here, I'll give them an answer. So you can get a very, very simple reflection attack using UDP. Packet comes in, packet goes straight back out again. So it could look something like this. Right? Protocol UDP, attacker sends the packet, destination points to the server that they want to exploit. The source address is faked. The source address of the UDP packet you put in the actual victim's destination address. And so there you go, every one UDP packet going out to the server responds with that UDP packet towards the victim. So it's kind of rewinding the clock to the early 90s where you did the one-to-one TCP type attacks. And so yes, this works fine for UDP-based servers, widely available servers where the servers are commonplace. They're poorly maintained or unmaintained. Clients are not qualified by the server, so anybody can pose the questions to the server at all. And this is where the and is, where the answer is bigger than the question. I mean, you can send a question which is a few bytes, you get an answer that is substantially bigger. And so the bad folks have really been looking for opportunities to try and exploit these to get maximum effect. So what could this be? Well, of course, DNS. We're all aware of the DNS reflection attacks. UDP-based query response servers. UDP is now almost ubiquitous with DNS. I mean, remember with DNS, if the packet is too big, it would fall back to using TCP. Well, eDNSO appeared in, what was it, 1999, the RFC was? I forget which RFC, but it was like 2600, something like that. But more and more support for extended DNS is now available. So you can have multiple UDP packets for DNS. Service is widely used. Everybody is a client of the DNS. Well, you have to be, otherwise you can't really use the internet unless you're really good with addresses. Servers are commonplaces. Resolvers are scattered all over the place. People don't care to set up the resolvers properly. They're quite happy to leave them wide open to the whole world. 30 million open resolvers or thereabouts. Clients are not qualified by the server. Any client can send a question to the server and we'll get a response. And of course, many DNS resolvers are unintentionally promiscuous. I mean, they are promiscuous by design, and system administrators who are not aware of this tend to just set them up and leave them wide open. So, and of course, with DNS, the answer can be a lot bigger than a question. You can do a question as, please give me the name for this address, or give me the address for this name. And if you ask the right question, you can get a very substantial response. So DNS DDoS attacks are now very common, and they can and do operate at sustained gigabit speeds. The efforts to try and mitigate these, I mean, we know about the root name servers, of course, are distributed in any cloud around the world. CCTLD and GTLDs are doing the same thing. So even if somebody does do a DNS DDoS, it has actually not very much impact on the day-to-day operation of the internet. What about other services? Well, you know, we've heard of all the small ports over the past, things like ChargeDen, SNMP, and so forth. But what about NTP? Well, this is the one that really took off late last year, early this year. NTP is a very simple protocol. It's network time protocol. It's there to ensure that devices on the internet have a synchronized time. So they're actually using real time rather than whatever the device thinks it might be. It's very, very important for network distributed services. If you're trying to cross-compare time and so forth, you want the time in each network device to be accurate. So, of course, we've deployed a lot of NTP servers to distribute the time across the network. And, of course, NTP is now being used for UDP reflection attacks as well. It's perfect function for NTP, uses UDP. Time servers is widely distributed. Pretty much everybody I know has got a time server or uses NTP at some level. Servers are scattered all over the internet. A lot of NTP servers now just tend to be automatically configured and then forgotten about. Home routers, smaller, simpler devices, unmanaged devices and so forth all use NTP to some extent. It's not necessarily promiscuous, but of course it's configured in promiscuous mode. And the way to really exploit NTP is to get an answer that's far bigger than the question. Well, NTP doesn't normally do that. Normally it's simply just you send a packet that has the time in it, the server sends a response with its own local clock values, and so on, without getting into the detail. 76 octet packet, not very big. So you'd think at first sight that it isn't actually very useful for a reflection attack. But then NTP folk added another hook into the model. The very same port is used for the command and control channel. So as well as the one for sharing what the current time is, it also uses the identical port for command and control. And that's the big mistake. Because what you can ask the NTP server do, NTP DC is a special NTP query program. You can send it a question, monlist, which will give you the list of the last up to 600 systems that the NTP server has interacted with. Right? So one UDP packet of 220 bytes input can generate up to 100 times 468 byte packets. That's an amplification of 212 times. So that's pretty impressive. But this is all caused by this special NTP query program. So you can do something like this. Just do the simple command, NTP-DC, monlist, and this is what you get back. You ask the local server, this is everything. So again, it's hard to see on the screen because of the small print. This is the list of systems that this NTP server last interacted with. And if you look at the packet dump on Wireshark, you can see, well, those are the interactions that the system has had to go through to cause that. Now imagine if you do this remotely, these are the responses that you could actually get. So one simple query has resulted in this massive response. So that's how the attack works. You send that query, that monlist query to the NTP server, and you can get a massive response. And of course, if you fake the source address to be the destination that you want to attack, you can completely deluge the attack. In fact, according to this Australian IT News article, this was the world's biggest ever DDoS, 350 gigabits per second, according to this French networking host. Well, that's probably one, but I mean, I'm sure there were several others over the intervening time in January, February timeframe. So, this is what you need to do to be naughty. This is not advice, this is actually what you need to do. Generate a list of open NTP hosts, very easy to do that. Write a simple script that sends the monlist commands to the open server with UDP source address spoofing. Enlist some coercible hosts to generate 2,500 monlist queries per second, and the servers will respond with 1 gigabit per second of DDoS stream. Rinse, repeat, and multiply. So that's what the folks have been doing. So how to be nice? Well, how to deal with it? Seal up your NTP. So when this first broke cover in early February, a lot of folks around the industry, starting from Team Cymru and all the others, were working really hard to secure NTP on internet backbone routers, on web servers, and pretty much everything else that was running NTP. So the example here, Team Cymru secure template should help. Of course, disable monlist. Update to the latest version of NTP. easy if you've got access to the system. If the system is proprietary to a vendor, then you've got to lean on your vendor to try and do the same. What about your routers? Well, there's the Cisco iOS configuration. Again, it's on the Team Cymru. Got the similar thing on iOS XR. Got the similar thing on a Juniper router as well. And for whatever your favorite router version also, you need to do the similar thing. Basically, turn off any of the control chat from the world to your NTP servers. Only allow simple queries. So these are the different languages that allow this to happen. In ntp.conf, again, restrict what the NTP server can actually handle. Being nice is not always possible. Significant volume of embedded functionality in appliances, consumerware, and you imagine all your little home routers with the fixed firmwares and all the rest. How do you deal with any of those? I've seen some operators actually blocking NTP requests from outside their network. A lot of the NTP sources that I've certainly been using over the years suddenly have now vanished, as those folks have decided that only the customers get to see NTP. And of course, the second point in the bullet here, we've been talking, 15 years about source address filtering, and we've talked about BCP 38. We've talked about unicast reverse path forwarding. And as Jeff says, 15 years of lip service without much actual support in our networks. How many people turn on, source address filtering in their networks? And I was doing the workshop last week here, the V6 workshop, and we ended up talking about this for some reason. And I don't know, I think most of the class looked at me very, very strangely. No idea what I was talking about. So, perform source address validation filtering. The source ports arriving in your network must only come from address space given to your customers, not any just random address. Deploy BCP 38 on the access edge, you'll stop a lot of this stuff happening. Useful resources here, what the monolith command's about, the description of the NTP tag. Our friends at Cloudflare have described that pretty nicely. How to seal up NTP, Team Cymru, have the template there, the Open NTP Service project, BCP 38, and of course the BCP 38 tracking as well. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Philip. Are there any questions for Philip about this?
And I'm not the original author, so please pass your questions to Jeff and Randy.
Okay. Well, then please do not try this at home, and if you
please,
the first
please
part,
do
the
BCP
second part,
38 at home.
And if the examples were a bit fast, the slides are on our website,
yes.
so you can download them and have a look. Seriously, nobody? Can I ask a question? Who is here running BCP 38? Who has his network secure? Silence again. I know it's getting late, but.
Hi, I'm Sergey from NetOut. The question is there flow traffic can be measured with IPv4 versus IPv6 with such attacks, or such attacks was only observed in IPv4 space?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, in this particular case, it was, I think this was Jeff's server that he had hosted somewhere, and it was a v4 attack. I have no idea if anything about this is happening on v6. I mean, I haven't looked at it any deeper to see if anybody has been attacked on v6. But certainly if you look at the templates, they're all about how to protect the routers and infrastructure on both v4 and v6. So my guess is that it potentially could happen on v6.
What my experience with v6 is that a lot of networks are actually lacking the monitoring to see what's happening. We've seen it happen, but I mean, a lot of this relies on decent net flow to find out what's actually going on. And I've spoken to people who saw a few gigs of IPv6 traffic coming in, but were unable to match it to see what it was actually about.
And I think Martin has joined Cloudflare too recently to know if it was been v4 or v6, or if there's been any v6. Little bit of v6, mostly v4. Okay. All right.
Yes.
عمر بالسماني MTIT. Just to ask a technical question about NTP. When I configured NTP server, is it all, how I sure that it's synchronized with all servers all the world?
How you want to make sure it's synchronized?
Yes, at the same time, because we know when as a DNS, it must be synchronized when have many DNS servers that reserve domains. How can I ensure that's synchronized?
Well, right. Generally, you find that most operators will operate NTP servers. And so, for example, I've put a Cisco configuration because this is the one I know more than the other two. But again, your upstream provider would provide NTP server facility. The point is, they let you just, synchronize time with them. A lot of people now have turned off the command and control functionality of NTP. So whatever you've been doing up to now should still work. So you still put, in iOS, the NTP server command, or NTP peer command, depending on what you're doing. But you can no longer do or you should not be able to now do any of the control relationships as well. See, when this attack was first happening, people just shut off NTP. They blocked port 123 on their border. And so that was a bigger issue because suddenly people lost time to synchronization. That's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is turn off the control channels to NTP. So there's that. Getting from your provider, you can buy a GPS receiver and use that in your network. If you trust the satellites to give you the right time. If you feel wealthy, you can buy an atomic clock and use that. And then at least you're independent of any other network operator to get your time synchronization.
Okay, thank you.
Philip, may I generalize the questions? 2 years ago, we discussed DNS amplification attack. This year, NTP amplification attack. Maybe it's not just separate cases, and it's even not simply DDoS and so on. It's not only regarding ingress filtering. Maybe the picture is more complex or maybe simpler. What do you think about the, for example, Paul Vixie proposals, ideas about that all services on internet should have some rate limiting mechanism? It's a Paul approach. Or internet will die in a few years.
Mm-hmm. Well, but you need to take a practical look at this. Again, if I just look at the workshop last week when we were talking about some of this, again, from the V6 point of view, a lot of people in IPv4 blocked ICMP totally in the edge of the network. Whereas, is that the right thing to do? Well, you could live with a totally blocked ICMP on the edge of your network because of the ICMP DOS attacks back in the early 2000s. But system administrators and network operators who do the same thing for IPv6 discover that IPv6 doesn't work because IPv6 relies on ICMP v6 for a lot of things. So the right way to do it there is, either you have a very, very big list of what you allow, or you start rate limiting. You're not going to see ICMP at more than 2 megabits per second, for example, or it'd be really strange if you are. So why not, you're not going to see NTP for more than, it's not going to be even megabits per second. It's only going to be a few kilobits per second. So yes, starting looking at the actual servers that are supported and doing the rate limiting. Of course, rate limiting needs router CPU if you're going to use a router, or it's going to need middle box CPU if you're going to use a middle box. So I think all these are right answers, rather than just say pulling the drawbridge up or pulling the gate shut. It's actually looking at the services that are needed to keep the network devices running and being realistic about how much traffic you should expect from any of those. Because, this is NTP now. What's the next UDP service that somebody's going to discover also is running on a network device that they can exploit? And that was the point that Jeff made in his presentation during Apricot as well. This is just the first, or not the first, it's another one of the many, as you say.
Yeah. No, yep, Kaveh.
Kaveh Ranjbar, and in my capacity as CIO of RIPE NCC, I would kindly request you to implement BCP38 if you're operating a network, or if you know someone who operates a network, because it will definitely save you money on bandwidth, and it will make you provide a much better service to your end users. So I strongly advise implementing BCP38.
Yeah. With that shameless plug, thank you. Wrapping up also, if you are an access provider, take care of your CP. As somewhere in Philip's slide said, like DNS open resolvers remain an issue, and there's millions and millions of DSL modems out there that don't do the right thing.
But you know, you can deal with some of those again by using BCP38, which a lot of people don't do. Go and pester your vendors and get them to make it default on interfaces. Stuff like that. Which is unpopular, but it would be the right thing to do.
You're right. Okay, then I think thank you
All right.
for this.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, time to talk about that other interesting topic. Transfers, right? Lovely. Let me see, where are your slides? Yes, this should be the one. No, this is not the one. Yes, this is the one. So Andrew, with more statistics on transfers and what we see in the registration service.
Yes, my name is Andrew de la Heem. I'm the COO at the RIPE NCC. And I'll be building upon the presentation given by Axel already this morning. And I see some new faces as well compared to this morning, so it might be new to those as well. Let's see. Something's going wrong on the slides. So some of the topics I'll be addressing is some regional statistics on address space distribution. I'll be addressing some questions on transfers between LARs and address space hijackings as well as some discussion on some policies that make the market that is out there currently more fluid. First and foremost, I think it's very important to note that getting an IPv4 allocation from the last/8 is still possible. Each member of the NCC can get one final /22. It's for both new and existing members. There's about 16,000 /22s set aside, and we're currently allocated around 3,000 of those, which means that 1/3 is only being picked up. There's only one requirement, and that is that there's a holding of IPv6 address space. So how does that look on a graphical way? This is the graph. The red bars are the additional allocations, so members that already have an allocation requesting their last /22. And the blue bars is the first one, the new entrants requesting /22s. And as you can see, only 1/3 is an additional allocation, which means there's quite a lot of existing members that still can get their /22 at the RIPE NCC. How is IPv4 allocations per country in this region? How does that look like? Well, Saudi Arabia has a high amount of allocations, followed by Jordania. And interesting enough, and the next slide is the amount of addresses per country, is that the Emirates, who were at the end on the former slide, are way higher here, which means that they have requested bigger blocks in the past. How difficult is it for getting IPv6 address space? Well, to qualify, an organization must be a member of the RIPE NCC and have a plan for making assignments within the next 2 years. That's basically it. The minimum allocation size is /32, but since a year or so, the initial 32 can be extended up to a 29 on request without additional justification. And I know that some of the people here in this room did not ask for that extension, but Xavier is here who can help you out in getting that if needed. A different graph, a comparison v4, v6 and both. The green part is members that have v4 and v6 allocations. The red part is only v6, and interesting enough, that is growing. It's still only 4% or so, but we see some growth there. And v4 only is decreasing because of it, which is interesting to note. V6 allocations per country. This is the amount of V6 allocations, so this is not in amount of address space, but we see Saudi Arabia having about 40 allocations followed by the others. So if you need more address space, V4 address space, what can you do? That's the main purpose of this session. Well, broadly speaking, transfers fall into three different kinds, as we see in the RIPE region. There's a transfer between a member of IPv4 PA address space that was previously allocated to the RIPE NCC. So those members that got addresses that want to transfer resources to somebody else. A transfer of address space by way of merger of acquisition. We call them the merger and acquisition in the NCC. And a transfer of legacy address space that was originally allocated prior to the existence of the RIPE NCC. All these three kinds of transfers are possible under the existing RIPE policy. And our teams are ready for you to help you if you have any questions on this. What does it mean, a transfer of allocation using, the first one I mentioned before, that one is under policy. There is a policy requirement. A transfer can only be between two LARs, and the LAR must confirm that it will make an assignment from the allocation. But that's basically it. It can be either permanent or temporary, and if a transfer happens, we publish this transfer on our website. So there's a big transfer log on our website which basically shows all the transfers that have been out there. We need some documentation, of course, a signed RIPE NCC transfer agreement, and company registration papers from both parties. This is based on RIPE 606. How many transfers have been completed? Well, we see an increase. There was a bit of a jump in between May and July 2013. But overall, we see a trend that we see an increase in the amount of transfers, the number, and the amount of size that is being transferred. And that goes hand in hand. So on a monthly basis, in February, for example, we had 50 transfers, and the result was about 500,000 IPs that was transferred. So we see an increase there. Then the mergers and acquisitions. That's a very easy case, clear cut. If an organization or part of it is being sold, the internet number resource in use by the network can be transferred. So we also need information for that, a merger or purchase agreement, company registration papers from both parties, and in case there are PI, so independent assignments assigned, then we also need a new agreement on the maintenance on that. And this is based on RIPE 595. So as you can see, there's lots of possibility to transfer resources. These are some statistics. Mergers completed. On average, we do between 20 and 15 mergers. This line is going down a bit, but if I look at Q1 2014, we see that it's going up again. So this is actually quite average on the whole. Transfer-related RIPE policy changes. So our community, the RIPE community, has seen the need for more transfers or easy transfers. And there were some policies that made it difficult to transfer your resources further. So these are 4 examples of policies that are either accepted or under discussion to make the market more fluid, so to speak. So, for example, 2013-03, it's called Post-Depletion Adjustments of Procedures. It removes the requirement to complete a forecast-based documentation of need. That's very important. Another one, which made it very difficult to transfer resources, was the restriction on end-user assignments in use within the region. And that specific part has been removed as well and is accepted by the RIPE community. So it's easier to move your resources, even if they're in use. And then there's 2 proposals, which I'd like to highlight here as well. One is the inter-RAR transfer of IPv4 address space, which is between RARs. There's no policy yet, but there's a policy under discussion, and I'd like you to make sure that you participate if you're interested in this field of transfers. Finally, the allowance of IPv4 PI transfers. Currently that's not possible under policy, and currently there's a policy under discussion which actually will be on the list the 31st of March, so this is a bit of a preview, but that will also allow the addresses to be easier transferable. To support our members, the RIPE NCC also offers a listing service. It's a service specifically for our members, and it's a service where you can offer or request resources. So the LAR can request resources, but also put them on there. The RIPE NCC has no interest in the financial bit, but you can put your contact details in the service so that you can be contacted when you want to do this. These transfers are under policy. This is a picture how it looks like, and I just had a look at it, and today, for example, there's 50 address blocks between 22/22s and /16s being offered on the listing service. In addition to that, there's a web page on ripe.net because some members may decide to use a broker to facilitate the process, the transfer process. We have a list of recognized brokers on the website. Those brokers have signed an agreement with us that they follow RIPE policy and procedures and can be very helpful. Finally, as you can see, we do request quite some information of you, but there is a reason. We see a lot of hijacks. Currently, the last 3 months, we saw about 200 cases of hijackings, and I'm not talking about announcing somebody else's address space, but really somebody trying to take over the maintainer of an object. So taking over the addresses of somebody else. 120 cases are still under investigation, and 80 cases have been prevented or solved by reverting to the old situation. The hijackers are targeting IP blocks that are unallocated or have outdated contact details. The hijackers abuse long-established RIPE NCC processes. They know our processes really, really well, and they try to make use of that. And they use sophisticated approaches. As Axel already mentioned, we have seen falsified passports, notary acts, and so on and so on. But we're doing a lot of work to prevent that. So what do we do as the NCC? We're updating our processes as appropriate. We're reverting unauthorized changes back to the old situation. We're reporting illegal activities to the authorities. And where members involved can be, when a member is involved and we can prove it, we close the LAR account and we do deregistration. Of course, it's very difficult for us to get the balance right. We have to be mindful of the balance between ensuring that we know who we're talking to versus being overly bureaucratic. Unfortunately, we have seen quite some discussion on the mailing lists that we seem to be a bit bureaucratic, but it's not for us, it's for you. We are trying to secure your resources. And that is something I think we'd like to get your understanding for and your support. So that's why I'm also pointing at the hijacking cases here. Of course, there's also something you can do. You can protect your resources against hijacks by making sure your RIPE database objects and contact information is up to date and up to scratch. You can, for example, request a resource certificate, which also is a signal to those that are malicious that you are actively looking at your resources. If acquiring resources, ensure you know who you're acquiring it from, and you can always contact us to see what the status is. And if you need help or think that a resource has been hijacked, then there's a special email address which is reg.review@ripe.net. And if we see a case there, we take active measures and look into the case, of course. If you have any questions on these kind of matters and want to have more detail on how the process specifically looks like for the transfer of resources, you can send an email to lar-help@ripe.net or go directly to Xavier, who is sitting here today and tomorrow, or come to me or one of my colleagues. Any questions?
Questions for Andrew? Huh? Nobody? I see Rob.
Hijacking, fascinating subject. Do you have any, could you say anything about regions where hijackers seem to live, or is there no correlation to be found? Or you would not like to reveal this, which I could understand.
It's a bit early to reveal it, and I'm not sure whether we want to reveal it, because we don't want to put a certain region in bad daylight. But as soon as we see a trend which needs to be addressed by the community, the wider community, then of course we will bring it forward. Maybe without exactly pinpointing which region it is, but if there's a need, we will. At this stage, it's a bit premature. Yeah.
Elvis?
So I was just warned that I'm stealing my own time. I'm following you. Now, bureaucracy. Indeed, I might have been a bit overly vocal on the mailing list. Maybe that's because I was part of the NCC and I knew the processes before and the new processes now. I had the feeling that some things have become overly bureaucratic, especially the mergers and acquisitions procedure. And that's maybe because I bumped into it. It might be just one case where I was unfortunate. But indeed, that was my opinion, that it has become a bit overly bureaucratic. And I don't know, I understand the hijackings part. However, the part where mergers between two companies happen, I don't think those should be overly bureaucratic. My personal opinion, though.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually a good point, and I'd like to say something about this. We notice on a daily basis that some of our members are struggling with it, because, as I said, there's basically 3 processes in place. On the inside of the NCC, it's a bit more because of the nuances of transfers, whether it's a merger or a network acquisition and such. So over the last 1.5 months or so, we did a big review of the process as such, and we're going to propose a easier process or a leaner process, which basically exists out of 2. It's either a merger and acquisition or a transfer on the right policy, and that's it. And our team will start implementing that as soon as we have brought it forward. But we're actively working on it to make it less painful, but still the due diligence is something we need to take care of course. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Last call? No? Okay, no. Thank you, Andrew. And as Andrew said, both him and Xavier will be around here if you've got any questions. And next up is Elvis, working for V4 Escrow, who is one of those IPv4 brokers.
Yeah.
You
Let's see
hit
where it
escape.
is.
It should be in that folder.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay. Oops, that's the last slide. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Elvis Vela. I work for V4 Escrow, one of the recognized IPv4 brokers in the RIBE region. As you can see, we're a recognized broker or facilitator in the RIBE NCC, APNIC, or ARIN regions. I'll start with the agenda. I have 2 major points. First is I've cropped some statistics about transfers in all the regions, and then I've looked a bit at the transfers happening in the RIBE NCC region and cropped the Middle East statistics. And then I've come up with some observations about how the processes work, what are the observed prices, and the prefix sizes. Do bear in mind that we are a rather new broker. We've only been registered in August last year, so I only have statistics for a few months. I'm talking about our observations, but I'm hoping that these numbers will make you understand a bit of the marketplace and how things are going. I'll start with APNIC, only because it's alphabetical order. They have had policies for transfers since 2010. They were not the first ones to have policies for transfers, but they had their first IPv4 transfer in November 2010, and since August 2011 they've come up with a policy which accepts, well, it's compatible with ARIN. So transfers between APNIC and ARIN can happen since that date. Now, APNIC has run out of IPv4 on the 15th of April 2011. They have quite a compatible policy with the one in the RIPE NCC region, where they only allocate a /22 and that's it. They're working on updating that policy, but that's something that will probably happen in the future. The total number of address space they have is about 54, maybe 55/8. According to Potaru, and there has been no transfer from APNIC to ARIN. On the other hand, there have been almost 700,000 IP addresses transferred from ARIN to APNIC, and that's almost, well, a bit more than 10% of the transfers that have happened in the APNIC region. You can see the statistics on the right side. Sorry for that. There have been over 1 million in almost every year, and I'm expecting to see in 2014 a bit more than 2, maybe even 3 million IP addresses transferred to or within APNIC. As you can see, in 2014, only in the first quarter, there have been 44 transfers and more than 1 million IP addresses transferred. Now, you can see that there's not a real trend there. There are some quarters where you could see large transfers happening, or other quarters where small blocks are transferred, but many of them on the left side, so the number of IP addresses is actually in thousands of them, so you can see wherever you see 1,500, it's actually 1.5 million. On the right side is the number of transfers. I have similar statistics for ARIN. They've started in 2009, in June, and they've had their first transfer in October. So in 2009 they had a compatible policy. They had a compatible policy with APNIC in July 2012 only. So APNIC was the first one to actually come up with the idea of inter-RIR transfers, and then ARIN followed. They haven't run out of addresses, and they don't have a last/8 policy similar to the one in the RIPE region. So ARIN will actually hit the wall running, maybe, unless something happens in the next year. However, they still have more than 1.3/8 available. They have done the most transfers. They have, in terms of IP addresses, since 2009, but mostly since 2011 actually, the number of IP addresses transferred has increased. As you can see, 2012 and 2013 have brought together over 12 million IP addresses transferred. The stats in 2014 only include January and February because ARIN publishes their statistics at the end of the month. So I'm probably expecting to see their statistics for March sometime next week. Now, again, same graphs. Not much happening until 2011, 2012. However, since 2011, 2012, lots of transfers, lots of IP addresses transferred within their members, and as I said, more than 500,000 transferred to APNIC. Regarding the RIPE NCC, we have a policy for within the region transfers since 2008. The first IPv4 transfer has actually happened in October after the runout. Well, actually, no, sorry. The runout happened in 2012. That's maybe a typo there. There is no inter-RIR transfers. So there is a policy. As Andrew said, it's a good idea if we restart the discussion on it. It has been frozen since 2012 and it's pending a new proposal. Let's hope that we get the new proposal soon and we can start discussing about it. The total address space that the RIPE NCC holds is around 49/8, and we have seen over 3 million IP addresses transferred. However, in the RIPE region, there is an obvious trend. There is an obvious trend of number of IP addresses transferred and number of transfers happening, especially since Q4 2013, when let's say it was the cleanup of the IPv4 policy has happened, and there is no longer a need to justify how many IP addresses you want to receive from another member. So right now, anyone can request or whatever, when they find a member that has IP addresses to transfer, they can basically just transfer all of them or as many as they need. Now, regarding the Middle East, there have been a few transfers to the Middle East. The most notable one is the /15 going to Etihad in January 2014. That was a /15 allocation. As you can see, most of the rests have been quite small, and I am expecting to see larger transfers and maybe more transfers coming to the region. From the region, though, there have been only 2 transfers, and both of them have been between members of the region. So there have been no IP addresses leaving the Middle East to go to Western or Eastern Europe or to Russia. So it appears that the IP addresses within the region have been kept here. And the last slide on statistics, I promise. We have expected to see a higher number of inter-RIR transfers from ARIN to APNIC. Although there have been quite a few transfers, since ARIN still has addresses to distribute, we were actually expecting to see a lot of addresses being distributed within ARIN and then transferred towards APNIC. It's not happening, and I'm really not sure why. I don't know what the reason is. We have seen quite a lot of inter-RIR transfers happening within APNIC, and we do see a continuous increase of IPv4 transfers, almost doubling every quarter from quarter to another within the RIPE region. In total, since 2009, there have been 23 million IP addresses transferred, which is more than a /8. So the transfer market does exist, and it does do I would say, good job. We are actually expecting to see more than a /8 being transferred in 2014 alone. Now, there are brokers in every region that has transfers enabled. RIPE NCC has 17 recognized brokers, ARIN 9 and APNIC 8. And I'll have to hurry up a bit. So I'll explain a bit about the services that the brokers usually offer. Most of the times they play the man in the middle, so they offer the escrow service where they make sure that when the buyer wants to actually buy the IP addresses, they will be the ones keeping the money until the transfer is actually completed. So the broker will usually sign a brokerage agreement with the seller and represent the seller in the transaction. And in most of the cases, the IP addresses that are being transferred do not belong to the broker. I have seen a few examples where companies that used to be ISPs have also become brokers and have transferred some of their IP addresses, but that doesn't seem to be the normal case in the RIPE region. Most of the transfers are happening between various companies. Brokers can offer additional services as well, setups of registries, the management and audits of these registries to ensure that you're using the addresses on an efficient manner. They can offer consultancy on best practices and the policy approaches. As Andrew said, brokers have signed a contract, well, sort of a contract with the RIPE NCC saying that they will follow policies. They they do have a good knowledge of the policies and will be able to assist the buyers or the sellers with the policies in place. Now, what we should do if you want to buy addresses, well, you should first calculate how many IP addresses you need. Of course, you can use the listing service if you want to contact the seller by yourself, or otherwise you can contact an IPv4 broker. You'll have to agree on the size and of the allocation and the price per IP address. You will sign a trilateral NDA with the broker and the seller. You will receive from the broker the name of the customer that is selling and the prefix available. You should be the one that examines the block yourself. The broker can help you with that. So sometimes the addresses are blacklisted or they have problems with routability. So I've listed two sites where you can actually check if the addresses are blacklisted or not. Once everything has been agreed and the trilateral NDA has been signed, you would also sign an asset purchase agreement, and then it's usually the seller that will initiate the transfer, and the buyer accepts it via the RIPE NCC. The types of payment methods can be either through the escrow, it can be a letter of credit from the buyer to the seller, or can be a direct payment as well. We've seen less direct payments and more escrow transactions through the broker, through ourselves. The seller process is usually they contact an IPv4 broker, they sign an NDA, they tell us what the IP range is and how much they expect to get per IP address. We will then try to match a buyer with their requirements. The seller should delete a site. Well, no longer mandatory, but it's a good idea if they no longer offer the services to customers to clean up the database before transferring the addresses. They should stop announcing the address space once they have reached an agreement with the buyer, and they are the ones that agree on the payment method. And usually we recommend them to initiate the transfer with the RIPE NCC because we think that's the best way, when the one that holds the addresses initiates the transfer and the one receiving it will confirm it. The brokers usually receive contacts from both parties. We sign NDAs with both parties to make sure that their information is kept confidential. We sign the brokerage contract with the seller. We can negotiate sometimes in the name of the seller and discuss with the buyer on the price and agree on the transaction price on the name of the seller. We can provide models of all the documents involved, and we can guide both parties in the process where the discussion with the RIPE NCC or the other RIRs happens. If we act as the escrow, then we release the money to the seller once the RIPE NCC has provided or the RIR has provided a confirmation of the transfer to either party. Our commission is usually paid by the seller, and I'll go to the observed prices. In APNIC, we have seen requested prices around $11 per IP address. Most of the transactions that we have brokered have been at $10.50, so there is room for negotiation, but we have not seen any transfer, at least we have not been able to broker any transfer below $10 per IP address. In the RIPE region, we do notice a lot of variation. It depends if the addresses are clean or dirty, and by dirty I mean addresses that may have been used for mass mailing or spamming. It also depends if the addresses are aggregated or not. We have seen transactions also be somewhere around $10 to $11, or more or less between 7 and 8 euros. If the block available is larger, then the seller accepts somewhat lower prices just because they're selling a lot of addresses, and the total transaction price will be quite huge. Sometimes the total transaction price goes over $1 million. So when they will receive $1 million, they can and they usually accept to reduce a bit the price. We have not seen transactions happening below $9 per IP address, What we have seen is that the largest blocks have been bought by the very large corporation like Vodafone, Etisalat, and etc. In APNIC, we have observed blocks that are offered are between /20 and /24 and /20. We've seen a strange pattern in APNIC where people would come to us and say we have a /16 for sale, and then they would actually tell us that no, wait a second, we have /22s, dozens of them, and we will sell the companies owning each /22. So what they're trying to do is they're registering a company, becoming an APNIC member, paying the fee, receiving a /22, and then trying to sell that company with a /22 for a profit of at least $4,000. And we've decided to stay away from that business model, and we've told those parties that we're not really interested to broker their blocks. Now, most of the offer space that we have seen for APNIC is coming from ARIN. We have a few interested parties from ARIN that want to transfer them regardless to whom, and the only RIR that they can transfer it to is APNIC. In the RIPE NCC region, we have seen at least 1/13 being offered, 2/14s, quite a few /15s, and many /16s. We have seen and we have been contacted by LIRs that in total want to transfer more than a /11. Block sizes, that's offered and requested. The block sizes requested in APNIC, we have seen requests mostly for 24 to /18s. We have also seen requests for /13s and etc., larger, but not too many, only 10 in 6 months. And in the RIPE region, we have seen, we have had about 60 buyers contacting us. About 35 of them have requested between /22 and /18s. 10 have been requesting less than a /22, and we had to turn them down and tell them to become a member, and or receive a sub-allocation or assignment from maybe one of our customers. We haven't actually done any of those transactions. And approximately 15 requests have been for sizes above /17, including a few requests for /14 or 13. We've also seen a lot of requests for leasing address space. Leasing in the RIPE region is possible in various modes. An LIR can make a sub-allocation, can make an assignment to another company, or can make a temporary transfer. Most of the requests, though, have been received from companies doing mass mail, spamming. As we have decided that we don't want to be associated with any of those companies, we've decided also not to participate in the listing processes. So we only broker transactions that are permanent. Now, that's most of the IPv4 I could talk about today. Let me talk about IPv6 for a second. As you can see on the Google website, since 2008 they've started collecting, or even 2007, they started collecting some statistics showing how many of their customers are actually connecting over IPv6. And in 2012 we have seen a growth of 100%. That was a growth from 1.5 to, well, sorry, from 1 to 2%. In 2013 we have seen a growth of 150% compared to 2012. And in 2014, it's been more than 3% in total number of customers that have accessed Google services over IPv6. You can see a strange pattern, and that is that there's more than 0.5% of those customers that connect during the weekend. So during the weekends, Google receives 0.5% of their customers more over IPv6. It's a strange pattern. I haven't been able to actually understand why there are more customers connecting over IPv6 in the weekend, but not during the weekday. Still, the percentage of IPv6 usage, as seen by us and anyone doing measurements, is quite low. It's below 5%, and we don't expect to see, although there has been a huge growth, as you can see here, we don't expect to see it growing not even at 10% this year. So although we're trying to promote IPv6 as well, yeah, our main business is to broker IPv4 addresses. So that's it. We're done.
Jim Cowie from Renesas. Can you comment on what kinds of audit or background research or reputation checks or other kinds of quality tests are being done, how that affects the valuation? You touched on it, but maybe some detail.
Yeah, right now we're not doing much. I've been advocating and talking about benchmarking tool that we are working on. Unfortunately, it's not done yet, and I don't think we'll have it done by Warsaw. I was really hoping that we will have it done by Warsaw, but we're definitely working on a benchmarking tool. The benchmarking tool would verify if addresses are listed in any blacklist. Then it would also verify with the major email providers whether an email sent from the IP addresses that are to be sold do reach those email providers, because you might have addresses that have been used for spam that are not in blacklists, have been maybe in the past, but no longer are in blacklists, but are still filtered and completely blocked by the email providers. So we're going to work on this, and we're also going to work on verifying the reachability from those IP addresses to the internet. So our initial idea was to use RIPE Atlas. We didn't move forward because we've realized that using RIPE Atlas will not really give us what we need. So what we're working on is now making kind of a scan of the internet, finding the pingable IP addresses in each IS number, and then from the IP addresses to be sold would ping or do something to verify if those IP addresses reach every single IS that has been assigned. So these are two major modules on the benchmarking tool we're working on, and we want to work on various others. Currently, since we don't have a workable product, we recommend users to, our customers to use here, either the blacklist check from whatismyipaddress.com or the rootability history using RIPE Stats.
Andrew Delahaye, RIPE NCC. One of the things you might also consider of using is to see whether somebody has requested the resource certificate, as it's a digital proof of holdership. So maybe that's also something you can do in your evaluation.
You mean whether they have the certificate? And how can you see that? Because I have tried to check that, and I've talked to Alex Alex Band, and
in the public repository. But we can
we'll
discuss
talk
it
about
later
it.
on. I think it would be very useful.
That's a very good idea.
Any other questions?
Martin.
Two more.
Shakil from Pakistan. You said that you take commission from sellers only. Why? Because this is not a general practice in escrow transactions. What is your commission percentage if paid only by the seller? Is the selling or buying price are the part of NDAs signed by the seller and buyer? If so, how the seller and buyer may confirm the lot price is the actual price?
Okay, so first question, we do represent only sellers, indeed, because that's the model we have chosen. Our initial idea was to request 50-50 commission, both from the seller and the buyer, but we've realized that, well, anyway, our decision, the business decision was to we represent the seller in a transaction. It's a bit difficult to represent both parties at the same time. So we've decided to represent the seller in any transaction, make a contract with the seller, and receive the commission from the seller. As for the commission, it all depends on the total transaction price. Because if the total transaction price is very high, we will accept a low percentage commission. If the total transaction price is low, then we might ask quite a large commission, because the work that we will do in both cases would be similar, almost the same. So the amount of work that we will do for a very small transfer or for a very large transfer is almost the same. And that's why we have decided that a commission, for example, for a /20 will be here. I can't tell you the exact number, but let's say here. And a transaction for a /16 would be somewhere here. And there was another question, the third one.
Is the selling or buying price are the part of NDAs?
Oh, yeah. When we sign the NDA with the seller, we also sign the contract with them, where our commission is explicitly mentioned. And the seller will tell us, I want to sell at this price. When we get contacted by buyers, we will tell them that we have prefixes available at this price, this price, this price, this price, depending on the size of the prefix, right? Okay, we will only tell the buyer exactly who the seller is and the block after a trilateral NDA has been signed. So even though under NDA we oblige ourselves not to give any details about the seller, we actually don't give details about who and which prefix is being sold until the buyer agrees with the price and signs the trilateral NDA. Once the buyer has signed the trilateral NDA, we sign it, we send it to the seller. Once they have signed it, of course, the three parties will know each other and they will already be in an NDA and ready not to disclose any other information.
Thank you.
Martin?
Yeah, Martin Plouflair. This is a very business-related presentation. That's okay. This is coming from what was originally, if we talk about RARs, as a very technical-related entity. Can you talk a little bit about what has changed, the stigma of bringing business, this is cold hard cash, into the world of the RIRs. The RIRs, I know, have accepted this, all five, in fact, actually. But can you talk a little bit about this and maybe put at rest any worries that networks have about acquiring space or maybe even selling space? This is the norm. The numbers you've got here are fairly high statistics, a /8 plus in a year. Can you talk about the stigma aspect? And I know what it was like in like 5-6 years ago, and this was an unspoken issue. It's very different now, it seems.
It is. 5 years ago, I was myself working for the RIPE NCC, and I never expected to see that numbers will have a value. Well, maybe not 7 years ago when I actually started. Later on, when I realized that these numbers will finish, I knew that we will probably come to this. And it's probably not only me. Everyone in this room probably knew or expected this to happen. Now, it's true. It's a huge difference, especially in the RIPE region. It's a huge difference between what you were getting in the past and what you can get now. I'm talking about, in the past you could have received tens or hundreds of thousands of IP addresses based on justification for a very small amount of money. And that was the membership fee. And now you actually have some companies have in their hands millions of dollars and can actually produce it, can actually make the money out of it. Now, it's normal for some companies to start thinking about the value of the assets they have. 5 years ago, we would have said IP addresses are not assets. IP addresses, if they're not used, should be given back to the RIRs, should be returned to the system. Everyone should do the right thing. But when you're talking about thousands, tens, or millions of euros, or dollars, or whatever, people are no longer that altruist. So, yeah, it's become a business, and it has become a model for companies that want to maybe make some money. I don't know if that really answers it.
Okay, yes, it does answer it, but I'll do a quick follow-up. I'll go back to the stigma statement. Are companies that acquire IP space, are they perceived in any way in a negative manner, either by their community, by the RIR, by anybody, or is this now the new normal?
From our point of view, and now I'm talking as a broker, they're our cash mine, our gold mine. I don't think the RIR perceives them in any way, because I think the RIRs don't really want to get involved in the transactions. They want to stay focused on one thing, and I think they're doing the very best thing to stay focused on registration. Because transfers would have happened with or without the agreement of the RIR, and we know that. So I think they're doing the best thing to stay focused on the most important thing, and that is registering who's actually using the addresses. The community, well, I don't know. We have the community here. Let's ask, who thinks that a buying member, LIR, is a bad member? Let's see a show of hands. Well, nobody. So I think that nobody will think if you're buying addresses because your business needs it, you're a bad person. Of course, we might see, and I do expect to see this in the RIBE region, unfortunately, we might see people buying the addresses just so that the new telcos, the incumbents, not the incumbents, but the startups won't be able to develop. I am expecting to see this model happening at some point. The large, very large companies buying the addresses and keeping them, or using them maybe recklessly, just so that the new ones cannot get into the market. That may be a bad thing, but I haven't seen that yet happening, or I'm not aware of that happening yet.
Yeah, and to add to that, we had some mission and vision sessions at the RIPE NCC. And one of the main aims for us is that we have a high quality registry. And that is key to our business. And that is key to you as well. So that means that if people want to transfer their resources, we have to enable them to do so and make sure that that is properly being registered in where it needs to be registered. So that is basically key. That's what we see. That's what we are breathing now. It took a while, but that's total clear. And also from our community perspective, the RIPE community, what I also addressed in my presentation, we see that people recognize this need and that they are relieving the current stricter policies towards a situation where they're a bit more lean towards a more fluid market, so to speak.
All right, and any other questions? This is loud.
All right, one last thing. If anyone has any questions regarding the market, regarding on what we see, what we observe, just send us an email. We'll explain how we see the market and how we maybe perceive things going now and maybe in the near future. So that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This brings us to the end of our first day. Tomorrow we're going to start at 9 a.m., but we're not done for today. We have a social dinner. It's going to be a cruise, and we're going to be leaving are we going to meet up at, so if you haven't seen this yet, okay, we're going to meet up at 7:15 in the lobby, Dubai Marina Lobby Tower. So if you haven't seen this, it should be up front. And then we're going to take a boat ride, right? So it's a non-alcoholic event, and everybody's welcome. Let's have some fun tonight. And tomorrow it's 9 a.m. sharp, okay? Inshallah. So and tomorrow is going to be the peering forum. So the first session is going to be opened by Garib. Thank you.